Yo, yo, everybody, it's Jean-Marc here with Fix This Edit. The Edit Doctor is in, and we're going to be taking a look at a friend's edit here, my buddy Chris Leclerc from Territory 6. They are legendary, amazing company. He is an amazing talent, and he has graciously allowed me to kind of review and give feedback on this and break down what works about it. And yeah, here we go. I'm going to show it to you right now. So let's dive in. So awesome, right? Of course, an unbelievable piece. I'm always just like astounded with what Chris and the team at T6 puts out. Super good stuff. If you want to check out the rest of their work, it's territory6.com, territory the number 6.com. Let's just jump in here to this edit and talk about what really works. Unbelievably beautiful shots across, really, really solid across the board. This is the kind of work that Chris and the T6 team puts out like all the time. But let's break down specifically like some of the aesthetics. Aesthetically, really unbelievably beautiful shots. I mean, if you look throughout, very, very well lit, just well composed. There's definitely a consistent tone across the entire piece. There's also a very consistent color grade across the entire piece. So you have this beautiful teal sort of throughout, but mostly in the shadows. You can kind of see that as well. When you see right here, like very teal on her eyebrows and in her hair, and also in the shadows throughout the rest of the scene. But her face is not teal, right? And you can see it's not orange either, so it doesn't go to this Michael Bay like dark blues and orange like highlights or whatever. So really nice grade throughout. This aesthetically also very, very nice, very consistent. You can see like the titles. There's no difference in the titles. They're all cohesive. And so you see that throughout here towards the end. And even this, though this is technically a different style graphic, right? It still also is building off of the brand imagery of sort of the C with the block underneath it and R with the block above it. And you see that block sort of throughout this title section as well. You see here. So really good stuff aesthetically. Also, this is shot on two separate cameras. So this is shot on the A7 III as well as the Alexa Mini. And Chris does a great job. I don't know who's his colorist, but if it's Chris, like rock on, dude. Beautiful colors out of this. Incredible range and beautiful motion. Specifically in this section, like it just like when it really turns on, like it's a relatively standard in terms of its cinematography until it gets to about this point, and then it goes a little crazy where she finally steps into her zone, which is a nice touch. You're really at this point kind of getting like, you can see she's more excited, we're more excited, and the cinematography itself goes a little bit bananas here, which is just really cool. Like in that section there. This right here is a Zolly, which is like this really epic, or like a Vertigo, where you're basically kind of like, pushing in and zooming out, or vice versa at the same time, just to kind of get this sense of like, whoa, totally like distorting. It's all the same, but like the lens distortion is actually like changing while we're changing like physical depth. So it's really, really cool stuff that actually basically pulls us into this like totally like new world of that is beyond standard like cinematography, if that makes sense. So anyways, really solid work across the board. Sound design is very subtle. He does a really good job of like bringing us in with a piece like this. I'm just going to crank this up so you can hear it. With a piece like this, you really do need to show us like the ambient feeling of a place. So visually, the look is very consistent. We talked about the color grade with this as well. Like a lot of newer filmmakers and newer editors don't necessarily know to include sounds from an environment. Most of the time, what you get is just B-roll with no audio and one music track. And when you decide to take a more cinematic approach with it, which is what Chris has done, you can see you actually hear the differences in scenes. And so I'm going to go ahead and play that back for you guys to hear it now. So let's pause right there. So already at the very beginning, you get the sounds of traffic right here. You hear it in the background, right? And then you hear, oh, like this person, the elevator, the person whizzing by, So all that stuff really elevates the story, and it really elevates the piece to be more of an experiential piece than just a visual piece. And that's the thing is, film itself is actually both auditory and visual, but sometimes we forget the auditory. We basically pick a music track and we throw it in there and we go, awesome, that's great. Really good filmmakers and storytellers do pay attention to the fact that there is room for auditory storytelling. I mean, right here is a perfect example of that. We have put her, she's in this zone, right about the moment she enters the gym. And that's like sort of her world, and everything starts to slow down. This is all relatively real life, typical sort of Foley sound effects for that environment. That person walking by is exactly what it would sound like if somebody walked by. But when you get here, everything slows down, right? And it builds this anticipation. You can hear the music track building. And that right there was kind of a beep, beep, and then the last one was like, let's go. So anyways, musically, a very good choice. Sound design, very subtle, but contributes to the whole thing really, really nicely. It's hard to critique him on anything, honestly, in the aesthetic world, because this guy crushes. I mean, Chris Leclerc is awesome. He's a master. He knows his craft. As far as like the narrative stuff, he did a really good job setting up the theme. And this, I think, is really important for beginning editors and editors in general to take note of. This right here, he's telling a visual story, and you don't necessarily, I mean, if I was to just give you frame by frame, you could kind of piece it together. What happens is he's essentially established the theme, which is that you can be trapped in someone else's world or you can live in your own. And so the beginning of this piece is a monolith. It is a physical structure that is, where you contain people. And that seems like a strange thing to start this piece out with, but when you think about it thematically, what he's actually doing is saying, this is the theme. Here's a person that's trapped inside of this building, and she's going to get out and find her own way. And it's very much like and you can see that actually, if you look at the beginning image and sort of the end image, what's the last thing we see? We started with, look at all these people, conformity, like this massive structure, impersonal, and the exact opposite is her closing image. It's when she looks right at the camera right here. Right here, where is it? It's towards the end here. That right there, that's our closing image. So look at the difference between this and this. They're opposites. And that's the whole point of it, the story, right? Is the arc is saying like, hey, here's this person, here's the world. It's inhuman. It's very, very constrained and structural. And then we introduce our character, and clearly she doesn't want to be there. And we get that very specific, awesome direction, awesome writing. In one beat, in one moment, we basically communicate everything we need to know about this character. She's leaving the office. She doesn't care about this kind of sort of zombie person behind her that's just wandering around in his world. Essentially, that monolith is his world, and you'll see a lot of that here. Watch what happens next. We know, first of all, we've learned here's the environment, here's our character. What does she want? Well, she wants to be somewhere else. Why? And what is the tone about that? Why does she want to be somewhere else? Is she anxious, or is she annoyed, or what is it? And so we see in this shot, again, great direction here. She's not annoyed. She's just impatient to get somewhere. We did clarify that it wasn't like a major issue. It's just she kind of like reads out, and it's very nice. And again, look at this blocking, right? So she's very well lit. We've popped her out from the background and the foreground. She's like the only one lit. We've actually rimmed this person here to allow him to step off the background a bit. Otherwise, he would kind of blend into this person's shoulder. So very nice lighting setup, and also the blocking. It's really communicating a lot of things. Look at this. I mean, you have this person turned away, this person turned away. Everybody's turned away. She's the only one we focus on. And again, that communicates she is one person inside of a giant structure that is not human, and it's not relational. And you'll notice no one else is looking at the camera. Now, that being said, as we kind of walk here, you'll see the other really interesting thing is she's leaving this environment. She makes a decision. That's kind of her moment of like, I'm going to go somewhere. So we see the next thing we see is she's going somewhere. And you see right here, this is the environment that she's leaving. It's a bank. It's very structural. But the other interesting thing is that she's the only one leaving. You'll notice that there's no one else walking in the same way with her. They're always passing her to go back. So again, we start to show that she's emerging from this sort of like, not only is it a place with there's structure, it actually is almost a vacuum, and it's drawing people into it, whereas she's the only one daring to leave it, which is very interesting in terms of the blocking. So that being said, she enters her environment here, and you can see it becomes her environment. We know that from the sound design right here. And And we start to see her as like she's in the zone. We start to see all these other people that are working out, and then we begin to see that she's actually in her happy place. I'm going to turn it down because you may not have been able to hear me. Sorry about all the technical stuff. I'm still working this out, but I wanted to make sure I was putting these out consistently for people. So you can see her smile is after she's observed all this stuff, these mindless people, doing this repetitive exercises that aren't new or enlightened, like this exercise machine we're trying to sell. She smiles, and then she says, this is where I've been, and again, this is very important. She hasn't smiled really this entire time, until this moment. And so from a direction perspective, really good. We then are telling the story like she's getting in the zone. She's now essentially what we see, her eyes are kind of locked onto her machine in this space. You may not be able to see it, but she's looking at something. That said, when she gets there, she smiles, and all of a sudden we have this opportunity. Now that she's here, you can see people, by the way, people are just kind of wandering around. They're almost, like I said, zombies. None of them are actually doing anything that's like exciting. They're all walking sort of around or other directions, but she's the only one. When she gets here, it turns into like, this is the focus area. This is the payoff. This is what she loves to do. And of course, everything goes bananas. Like that shot is crazy. It's awesome. And it pushes super, super rapidly to show us there's a ton of energy, ton of intensity, and a couple of really awesome product shots as well. Now, that's the theme. We see that like communicated super, super well throughout. Chris establishes the world, the main character. He then shows sort of what she wants. All of a sudden, she's in the gym. She's confronted by the everyday pattern of workouts. Again, very similar, but she smiles and she ends up becoming sort of like, she becomes, essentially the arc of the story is trapped to free, right? Anyways, really nice direction, by the way. There's a really great note I had to have in here, which is just super funny. Made me smile. The direction right here on this character, not her, sorry. This guy right here, he's phenomenal. Like, look at that, just so disinterested. Like, this biking is so boring. Anyways, sorry. So that's a nice direction thing. I hesitate to make any critiques on the structure of the narrative, but I think the only critique I have actually has to do with setting up her viewing the other people. This is sort of like a minor thing, if anything. Basically, when she steps into the environment, it would be nice, despite her locking onto this thing, that her eye line tells us where we should be looking next, right? So when we see somebody looking off screen, we typically cut to show what they're looking at. The interesting thing is that she makes this, spatially, it kind of technically doesn't make sense. She walks around and she's sort of walking this line and she's looking straight. But then we cut to this shot here, and it works, and Chris does a great job of kind of matching the motion. So the camera essentially becomes her, and you'll see what the camera does. The camera follows the same track that she does, essentially left to right along all of the running machines down that aisle, but we're kind of panning up and looking at her. So that sells really well. The only concern I have is when we kind of go to this shot here, we notice like no one else was looking at the camera. That was the thing I mentioned, except for this guy. And it's a little bit distracting to me as a viewer, and I don't know if that's how you guys struck you, but it is, it works. It's just, you kind of wonder like, wait a minute, whose story is this? And so that's one minor thing, but one way you could address that is by throwing another cutaway of her instead of this guy. We go to this guy and it's like, he's really present to the camera and he's really close up. It's kind of weird. It's a shock in a way. But if you threw this shot of her like looking, so I was going to find it. If you threw one of these shots of her like just looking around, it would actually help kind of blend that a bit, because you'd be like, okay, we saw the guy on the treadmill, we see her looking, and then we see another guy doing the rowing. But that said, it's very minor. And honestly, it's a 60-second spot, I believe. Yeah, so it's a 60-second spot, and obviously you only have room for so many shots. So totally understandable, and there's certain limitations of the medium itself. That said, there is another way you can also probably address this. So what I'm really talking about here is she looks, we see this guy, but then instead of keeping that same line, we jump right to this really close-up shot of this guy. And it's kind of jarring because we don't maintain any left to right motion. We don't maintain any of the same sense of like point of view that we used to have from the previous camera shot here. So let me show you that real quick. So this is point of view on this one is clearly we're her walking down the aisle. And then this becomes static and we're just looking at a guy's face. Now that being said, this is more of a perspective. This is probably what she would actually be seeing. So if you matched those two, and there may have been a reason why Chris was going, hey, maybe this here matching to this shot might have been a little too abrupt or something, this one here. But that being said, I kind of did a little bit of tweaks to see what would happen if we rearrange these shots a bit, instead of even cutting to this one, maybe cutting to this guy right here next, so that we can communicate that she's walking in, she sees this guy, and then she sees this guy. So let's see what that does to the story from the top here in Premiere. Just a quick reshuffling of those clips. So you see what we did there? Instead of having all this information about, let me mute this track so I can actually scroll through it for you. Instead of having all this information that's like, we have this guy, and then we have this guy's close up, and then we have this guy's sort of wide, and then we have this guy, and then we have this guy, or whoever it was, But basically, instead we're actually building on the motion. So see how we're walking down the aisle here. We're looking to the left. We're continuing to walk down the aisle here, but we're looking to the right. That gives us a little bit more of continuity. We kind of know where she's moving. And even then when we hit this, it's now not so abrupt. It doesn't stop. I still wouldn't put this shot here, because you're going to have this sense of like, okay, we stop here. And that's a little strange. Whereas I think if you actually stayed with this sort of wide here, then you cut into the close-up. It works, because then you have this other static close-up. And you start to realize what you're really communicating here is, okay, there's a person, and I think the way this builds on top of each other is very nice, because you say, okay, here's a person that's working out. He doesn't look particularly bored. He's just working out. So we're communicating, she's in the gym, she's observing other people. The next thing we see is this guy is working out, but he's not necessarily very happy about it, right? The next thing we see is here's another couple of people, but we're really going to focus on he's not particularly happy about it. And we're getting closer up to those people. We're seeing what their actual reactions are and how they view their workouts, and this person too. And this is really kind of the capstone in a way. Like, she's really not into it at all. You just see it's like, I'm lifting weights. And then you see, look at the difference between this face and this face. She's much happier. She's ready to go dominate. This person's like, I'm lifting some weights, And so that's really like the only tweak, if I were to make any tweaks to this, because otherwise it is just a stellar piece, and it's incredible work, and Chris and his team are just like legends, masters of their craft. So all that to say, if you guys want to check out some of his work, territory6.com. That's territory and the number 6.com. I think that's it for this piece, but please subscribe up there. And if you want to see another Fix This Edit video edit review, I think you have to click that away. Awesome. And if you need or want feedback on any of your edits, hit me up in the comments below, drop me a link, and then we'll make it happen. Anyways, thanks so much for checking it out. Hopefully it was helpful.